I think probably the biggest myth in the industry is that it is difficult to sell franchises. And when I say that, I say that I don't want to make it sound like it's an easy process,
Hmm.
because it's not easy to sell franchises. But I think that what people fail to understand is that it is a process. If you spend, if you spend an adequate amount of money, you spend it in the right places, you're going to generate a predictable number of leads. If you handle those leads professionally, if you've got something good to sell, you provide them with a good message, you're going to get a predictable number of meetings. And if you have a well-structured franchise contract and you are able to deliver success to the franchisees that you have, you're going to be able to sell a predictable number of franchisees.
Hey everyone, this is Devin Miller here with another episode of The Inventive Expert. I'm your host, Devin Miller, the serial entrepreneur that's grown several startups into 7- and 8-figure businesses, as well as the founder and CEO of Miller IP Law, where he helps startups and small businesses with their patents and trademarks. If you ever need help with yours, just go to strategymeeting.com, grab some time with us to chat, and we're always here to help. Now, today we've got another great guest on the podcast, Mark Siebert. And Mark, we're going to be talking about a few things and primarily focused on franchising your business and whether or not it's right for your business and how you might make a determination about that, and kind of what the right vehicles are for franchising and meeting goals and objectives and what's involved with it, and good strategies, and also the copycat model of franchising versus building something custom. So should be a great discussion, and definitely looking forward to it. And with that much as introduction, welcome to the podcast, Mark.
Thanks, Devin. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So now, before we dive into a great discussion, for those that haven't caught, Mark was a guest on our sister podcast, The Inventive Journey. So definitely encourage everybody to go and check out Mark's episode there if you want to catch or learn more about his full journey. But for those that haven't had a chance to catch that episode or just looking for a quick introduction, introduce yourself a bit to the audience.
Thanks. I'm CEO of a company called the iFranchise Group, and I'm on the board of another company called Top Farm Media, and I'm also the president of a company called iFranchise Group International. So the two iFranchise Group companies basically help companies to franchise, and we work with about 2/3 of our clients are companies that are franchising for the first time, companies that weren't franchising and then became a franchise. So companies like Massage Envy, companies like years ago I was involved with Buffalo Wild Wings, other companies, Auntie Anne's Pretzels, Which, more recently companies like QC Kinetics, helping them get involved in franchising, helping them launch their franchise programs. And then about 1/3 of our work is involved with helping companies to that are already franchising to do a better job with the franchise program that they've already developed. And then the other company, Top Farm Media, is a franchise lead generation firm which helps companies grow faster through franchising. So those are the roles that I have.
Sounds like it's been a fun journey and a lot of great roles. And so with that, maybe now just or with that great introduction, diving into a bit of the topics at hand. So I guess the first question, maybe just as a level set, and most of the audience probably knows it, but just kind of give us a definition. What is franchising? Kind of what is it, when it comes to mind? Is it, give us a kind of a quick definition as to what franchising is, or kind of a little bit of a background on it.
Okay, so franchising in the U.S. is defined by the FTC under FTC Rule 436, and it's a business relationship that has 3 elements, which you are licensing somebody to use your name or your trademark, where you are taking a fee for that license, and where you're providing them with certain services, which I shorthand by calling it the system of operations. But so if you have the name, the system, and a fee, you're a franchise. The system is actually defined as being about 18 different elements that any one of which could trigger it. So it's things like, do you provide an operations manual? Do you provide a territory? Do you provide sales training? Do you provide the kinds of things that would help somebody in business? So do you provide assistance? Do you provide, it's called significant operating control or significant operating assistance in the law, but you provide them with control or assistance. Do you provide them with your name, and do you take a fee in return for that? And if you do, it's a franchise. Now, there's some state laws that are a little bit different, but effectively, if you think name, system, fee is a franchise, that's probably the easiest way to remember it.
No, makes sense. And so if I were to now condense that just to my level, basically you're helping people launch, or if somebody wants to do a business but doesn't want to or start from scratch or from ground up, they can leverage a brand that another person's built, as well as a system that's put in place, and otherwise get some of that training and that exposure, or that marketing and that recognition, so they can more easily hit the ground running. Is that a fair summary, at least on my level?
Right. From the franchisee standpoint, the franchisee gets the benefit of all the years of knowledge and the hard work and the hard knocks that a franchisor has learned to, over the course of building their business. They get the benefit of the brand that they've built, and they pay for the privilege of using that brand and that knowledge. From a franchisor's standpoint, they've got three big benefits. First, they're using somebody, the franchisee is the one who invests all the capital in building out that business. So they're using other people's money. Second of all, the franchisee is going to be doing a lot of the legwork. So the franchisor can grow a lot faster because they're leveraging off that time. So the franchisee might be looking for the site, negotiating the lease, working in the local market to recruit people, training people in the local market, doing all of the build out work in the local market. And third of all, they are getting a highly motivated manager who's going to be long-term in the business. McDonald's has some third-generation franchisees now. It's not like hiring a manager that these days is pretty hard to keep long-term. They're getting somebody who's highly motivated because they've got their own money invested in the business. And so, from a franchisor's standpoint, they get the benefit of time, people, and money. And from the franchisee standpoint, they get the benefit of somebody else's intellectual property and somebody else's brand.
No, makes perfect sense. So it sounds like it can be a good arrangement on both fronts. Now, or one question that there probably comes up, because if you think of, okay, McDonald's or a Subway or Quiznos or a Jimmy John's or whatever, or restaurant business, hey, great, if they're a big brand and I want to leverage their brand or open up a store, makes sense. Now, if you're not a nationwide huge brand and haven't gone down that route, but you built a good successful business, maybe it's a bit more local or in a given area, or it's it's a bit earlier on, kind of walk us through. Should you be jumping right to franchising? Should you wait a period of time? Should you have so much growth that you have so much experience? Or kind of, if you're in the business as the owner now, when should you start maybe considering doing franchising?
Well, to me, there's two real things that you need to take into consideration when you're making a decision to franchise, aside from the question of whether or not you got a franchisable business. But let's put the question of the franchisability of the business off to the side. But in terms of the timing of your franchise effort, the first question is sort of, what does the marketplace look like? So, I wrote an article a while back called Quick versus Slick, and it really said that if you're going head to head with McDonald's, you better be pretty slick, right? Because these guys are a behemoth, and these guys have a great marketing arm. They've got a great system. They got huge buying power. They got huge advertising budgets. If you're going head to head with one of these bigger companies, you have to be very slick. So when you look at something like a Five Guys, which rolled out their franchise program sort of in competition with McDonald's, not directly comparable, but they spent 17 years on their business model before they rolled out the franchise, and they built out multiple locations before they did it. So somebody like that, they really had to make sure they tightened up their operations. Now, on the other hand, if you've got something that is a new model that's brand new to the business world, and you think that you're going to get knocked off and you want to make sure that you're first to the market, you better be pretty quick, right? And so a client of mine called Massage Envy, when they first got started in franchising, they had been open, their first location had been open for 6 months. They had, John Leonicio, who was the founder of that business, started out in the health club industry, decided that he wanted to translate that membership-based business model into the massage, therapeutic massage space, created this business model, and decided to franchise very quickly because he recognized that he was really revolutionizing what was going on in that space. And he had to be very quick because there were people that followed him very, very quickly into the marketplace. By being fast, he was able to dominate the market. And while there are many companies out there, there's a whole handful of companies that have 500, 600 franchises. Massage Envy has maybe 1,100, 1,500 franchises now. They're twice as big as probably the next biggest one because they were very quick to the marketplace. So that's the first consideration, is sort of what is the market telling you? The more important consideration from my perspective is, with every new client that I talk to, the first question that I always ask them is what their goals are. And, where do you want to be in 5 years? And I try to pin them down on that goal question based on what kind of, tangible takeaway do they want to have at the end of 5 years. Do they want to sell the business in 5 years? If they want to sell it, how much do they want to sell it for? And I'm not asking them to start with, here is how much I think it will be worth based on what I think I can do. Instead, I'm asking them to say, here is what the next 5 years of my life, the blood, sweat, tears, sleepless nights, here's what that's worth to me. At the end of 5 years, I want to cash out with this number. And maybe it's, you don't want to cash out. Maybe you want to hand it down to your heirs. Maybe you want to make a certain level of income, whatever it is. But set a goal, make it a tangible goal, and then back into a growth plan based on that. Now, if your tangible goal, sometimes people come to me and they say, well, I want to do something and I've got a 10-year plan. If you've got a 10-year plan, you're not in any hurry to get anything done, and you can wait a year or two to franchise. And if you think that your business model isn't quite well enough prepared for franchising, then you probably want to wait. If you got a 5-year plan, you probably want to move sooner rather than later. So you have to let your goals dictate that. And then the third element, which I sort of put on the back burner, but is your business ready to franchise? Is your business model franchisable now as it is? Not have you perfected the business, because perfection a lot of times is sort of the enemy of progress. It's really, is your business model able to provide a good rate of return to your prospective franchisees? And are you in a position where you can get your franchisees trained and successful in that business? And is it ready for that, to take that step? So those are the three elements of that analysis from my perspective.
No, I think that that's definitely some great analysis and a lot of good ideas and feedback. Now, one maybe follow-up question to that is, so let's say I'm want to cash out in 5 years, and I want to have a good amount of money for retirement or for my next venture or whatever that might be. And so I can define, hey, I think I'm at the right, have the right goals, probably the right time frame. But and you start to touch on it, but how do you know if it's a good franchise model? So I'll give you just an example. Maybe it's a good or bad one, but I'll give it anyway, which is, I see a lot of food trucks that come out there. Something that's popular is kind of, I don't know that it's replaced restaurants by any means, but it's given an alternative with different locations and different, options and for different things. So I see those pop up on what I'd say reasonable basis. And sometimes you'll see that it's somebody that just has a good idea and wants to go out and try it. And other times it's more franchise, it's world's greatest corn dogs or whatever the name is. I can't remember now. So how do you, let's say you take that example and you're starting out your own brand, built up your own food truck, you got some good food, you got some good sales. Is that what's needed in order to, if you wanted to franchise, or are there other criteria? Or kind of walk us through a little bit. If you take that scenario as an example, what would be some of the questions people should be asking themselves?
Okay, well, so if you have, let's say you've got a food truck. Food trucks are, to me, are problematic from a franchise standpoint from a couple perspectives. One is that food trucks tend to have lower level of average unit volumes, which means that you're going to get less in the way of royalties, which means you can provide less in the way of support. A second problem is that they are mobile, which means that in order to control quality, you're going to have a little bit more difficulty in terms of sort of any kind of random spot checks that you might do in terms of making sure that you can visit these guys. So, there's also issues relative to, if it's a food truck in Chicago, what happens if it snows? There's questions about what happens if you get a flat tire. There's a number of difficulties with it. That's not to say that food trucks can't be franchised. There are some out there that do. But from a general standpoint, in terms of what I look for in a franchise, I'm really looking for really three core questions to get answered when determining whether a business is ready to franchise. The first thing I look for is the business saleable? So to answer the question about saleability of a franchise, I'm looking at, are they getting a lot of good press? Are they getting a lot of good social media? Do they have a big following? Do they have a lot of people coming into the operation? Do they have, are they doing great numbers? Do they have a strong management team? Do they have multiple units in operation? Have they gotten any unsolicited inquiries for a franchise? I'm looking at the kinds of things that sort of tell me, that they have that sizzle factor, that they've got something that people would want to buy. And that's sort of the first thing. Now, to some extent, you can create that sizzle if you got a good marketing firm, which is one of the reasons why we developed, our marketing arm. But, there's sort of an inherent, do we have something that can be sold here is the first question that we want to try and answer. And,
let just one question just to follow up on that. And again, I find it all very interesting. So how do sometimes I look at a business, layman are looking at the business and saying it's centered around the person that's running it has a great personality, is a good people person, can get out, get people excited, or otherwise get people engaged. And that seems to be more difficult to franchise because now it's so person centric. It's not really I understand they have to sell product and that, but it's really the person that's driving a lot of that sales and that, that growth and that those clients is centered around the person and their personality. Is that a hindrance to it, or is that something that can be franchisable, or kind of, how do you take that into consideration?
Yeah, you're actually on my second point, which is, can the business be duplicated? So the first one in terms of sales, you can sell, we can sell businesses, but we might not be able to duplicate the success that a new franchise that you've had. So what we are really looking at is that second point is, can we duplicate the success that a franchise, that you as a franchisor or as a business owner have already had? And to look at that, we say, first of all, is the business model replicable? Is it something that works because you've got a long-standing reputation in this marketplace and you've got a bunch of loyal clients that have been with you for 20 years? Or is this something where you've got a marketing formula that happens to work? Is this business model something that works from market to market to market? Or is this something that maybe is going to have a more difficult time in certain markets? So for example, Cincinnati style chili. If you ever had chili from Cincinnati, they call it five-way chili. And it's sort of a combination of spaghetti and beans and sort of a sweet chili sauce. And then they put on onions and cheese on top of it. And they call that five-way chili. It's something that if you brought it down to Texas, it would never sell. So it's something that's very regional in terms of its taste. It's franchised locally, but it's not going to be something that has a broad national appeal. It's done pretty well in some markets, though. I shouldn't rule it out entirely. It's done well in Florida, and it's done, where you get a lot of Ohioans, and it's also done well in Las Vegas. So But does it translate well? Is it a swimsuit shop in Florida that's maybe not going to do so well in Chicago? Uh, then you look at other things. Is it location dependent? Is it something where you've got something that's in the heart of Disney World or downtown Manhattan that might not translate well into other markets because there is no comparable to Disney World or downtown Manhattan where they could put another one of these kind of locations. And then we also look at things like systemization. Every good business has systems, but are the systems up here in somebody's head, or are the systems written down on paper where they can be translated and built into operations manuals and training programs and things of that nature? And that's one of the things that we do for some of our clients. So that's another one of the things. But so those are the things. If it's something that's really dependent on an individual, probably can't be franchised. If it's a French chef, a Culinary Institute of America kind of chef, or a cordon bleu chef is responsible for it, you're going to have a pretty hard time franchising that kind of a concept. So that's the kind of transferability question that we sort of answer as the second step of our process. And then the third thing that we look for is ultimately the acid test, which is return on investment. So from a return on investment standpoint, there's two criteria. It's how much does it cost you to get in, and how much can you make after deducting a royalty and after deducting an owner manager's salary, assuming that owner manager is somebody that is compensated at a market rate. Excuse me one second. Sorry about that.
So now let's say you hit all those criteria. You said, okay, got a good franchisable business, kind of hits the right, goals and objectives for you, checks all the boxes. Now, what is let's say I get all of that in place. What is the kind of the process, or what is involved now with going out and getting a franchise set up? Was it, mostly legal paperwork? Is it getting everything written down? Is it going out and finding the people to franchise? Is it all the above? Or kind of walk us through a bit of kind of now what's involved with actually going out and starting to franchise a business?
Yeah. So the process of starting a franchise business is not a one size fits all kind of business model. So it sort of depends on what the franchisor is looking to accomplish. And this is another one of the reasons why we look at what the goals and objectives of the individual owner of the business is trying to accomplish. Sometimes somebody's just looking to be able to provide value to some of their long-term employees and give them an opportunity to buy into a location, or they get some inquiries and they're looking to grow in a local market. Sometimes they're looking to grow very slowly. Sometimes they're looking to grow very aggressively. The five core elements of any franchise is: one, they have to have sort of a good plan for how they're going to grow. Second, they have to have a good set of legal documents. Third, they have to have a good set of quality control documents. Fourth, they have to have an ability to market the franchise, attract qualified franchisees, and deliver a good message to them. And fifth, they have to be able to sell franchises to people and actually implement that franchise program, get those franchisees up and operating. And each one of those things has a lot of different components to it. So when we talk about the plan, for example, developing a strategic plan, having a plan to me is not as important as what that plan should do for you. So as an example, the growth of a franchise is sort of like growth on steroids. If you have one little thing wrong, you can replicate that over and over and over again. And by replicating that one little mistake, you can find yourself in a situation where it's very difficult to undo the mistake that you've made. Because in a franchise situation, you might sell 100 franchises. If you are wrong by 1% on your royalty, let's say you have a business that's doing $500,000 a year, where you think the franchisee is going to do $500,000 a year in revenue, and you had a 6% royalty built in because that's what everybody else is doing, but you should have been at 7 because you're providing more support. That 1% difference is $5,000 off the bottom line. But it's $5,000 off the bottom line times 100 franchisees, right? So now it's a $500,000 mistake. And it's not a $500,000 mistake once. If you have a 10-year contract, it's a $500,000 mistake every year of that 10-year contract. So now it's a $5 million mistake. And if you're planning on selling your company to a private equity company several years down the road, they're going to look at that $500,000 mistake and they're going to multiply that times whatever earnings multiplier they're going to give you. So if they're giving you a 10 times multiple, that's another $5 million that's coming right out of your pocket. So a 1% mistake can easily add up to $10 million, $20 million mistake very quickly in any kind of business. And there's a dozen different decisions, 24 different decisions like that you make in a business planning process. So you have the comparable analysis, you have to do the financial modeling, you have to know who you're going to hire and when you're going to hire them and what you're going to pay them to be able to understand what it takes to be able to build out a successful franchise company. Now, if you're only trying to sell one of these things to your brother-in-law, you don't need to go through that level of detail. But if you're trying to sell 100 of these things, you probably should, right? Now, second, you have to develop the legal documents. That's not something that we do. We do all the other stuff. We don't do the legal documents. But you have to do a franchise agreement. And under FTC Rule 436, you have to provide a disclosure document that has 23 different points of disclosure. And then you may have some ancillary legal documents that'll be attached to that. So it might be personal guarantees or lease documents and things of that nature that would also be included as part of that disclosure, financials, things of that nature. So that would be the second piece. And that's required by law. On the quality control side, you need something that's going to be, and first major piece is really the operations manual. An operations manual is, while it's organized sort of functionally, the individual tasks within each function are going to be broken down, usually based on best practices and also based on brand standards. And they're divided into sort of those two categories. The brand standards are things that you're going to default your franchisee for if they don't live up to them. So if you've got that food truck and they're serving food that's unapproved food, or they're using vendors that are not approved, you can find them in default and take their name down and get them out of the food truck business. But if they are, there'll be also things that you consider to be best practices. And the best practices might be things that are focused on maybe some of the personnel issues. Things like, are you going to give a paid vacation to your employees? And those kinds of things. You don't want to make default issues. You don't want to exercise that level of control, because if you exercise that level of control, you run the risk of creating some kind of a joint employer relationship or having some kind of third-party liability for your franchisees and their actions, and you lose that sort of independent contractor relationship that allows you to avoid that liability. So it's really important that you understand sort of those distinctions, and that's one of the reasons why companies like ours exist, because we know how to craft those kind of manuals in a way that allows people to avoid running into those sort of joint employment kinds of issues. And then beyond that, there's things like training programs and training videos and train the trainer manuals and online learning systems and things like that. The next thing you need to do is to develop those marketing materials and marketing plans. There's 7 basic channels that you can use to generate franchise leads, and the mix that you're going to use is going to depend on the nature of the franchise that you are trying to sell. If you're doing a large investment restaurant franchise, your marketing methodologies can be very different than if you're selling lawn care franchises. So you have to figure out, how are we going to go to market? What message are we going to use? How are we going to differentiate ourselves in that market? You need to figure out where you're going to budget your money, how much you're going to budget. The average marketing spend for a company getting into franchising for the first time is probably in the area of about $10,000 per franchise you want to sell. So if you wanted to sell 6 franchises in a year, your marketing budget would likely be $5,000 in January, $5,000 in February, $5,000 in March, $5,000 in April, and on and on. So you'd have a marketing budget of about $60,000 for the year. And the time frame to sell a franchise is usually going to be about 12 to 14 weeks. So sometime January, February, March, April, maybe you sell that first franchise and you get that franchise fee of $35,000 in. So you have to be able to cover that initial 3, 4, 5 months worth of working capital as part of your planning process. So it's important that you're advertising in the right places, because you're not even going to know for 4 months whether your advertising is the least bit effective. So you want to make sure that you're advertising in the right places. And then the materials you use, for example, e-brochures or websites, some of the states that regulate franchising, and there's 14 states that regulate franchising, 8 of those states actually require the submission of your advertising materials in advance, and they regulate what you can say in those advertising materials. They're going to want to take a look over it, and they're going to tell you whether or not it's approved for use in their state or not. And you don't want to develop materials and find out after the fact that they weren't approved, and that would certainly not be a good thing for you. So you want to use what you can to try and attract these franchise. Video is a big thing these days. We do videos for a lot of our clients. We do brochures and do a lot of sort of marketing materials and collateral materials for a lot more of our clients. And again, the more aggressive you want to be, the more tools you're going to have to try and sell those franchises. And then the last piece is making sure your team is educated about how to sell franchises. And part of the sales process is knowing how not to sell franchises, or how to avoid selling franchises to people who are not going to represent the brand well, or who are not going to be a success in running your franchise. Franchisee success is the single most important factor for a new franchisor. If you are able to make your franchisee successful, you'll be successful as a franchisor. And if you are not able to make your franchisee successful, it's almost guaranteed that you're going to fail as a franchisor, because it's going to get out there. It's going to be on the internet. These franchisees are disclosed in your franchise disclosure document. It is the chances of you being able to succeed as a franchisor with a large number of failures is slim and none.
Well, no, that was awesome. That was a great master class, and how to go about determining whether or not you should franchise, whether or not, or what you might consider, what the process is. And feels like there's a ton more that we could talk through, or that would be helpful. So we'll have to have you back on to in a future episode or one of the sister podcasts. But for today, as we are starting to reach towards the end of the episode, I always like to wrap up with one question. So in this case, the question is if you were to, or within your industry, what is the biggest myth and why is it wrong?
I think the biggest myth in the industry, and there's, I think probably the biggest myth in the industry is that it is difficult to sell franchises. And when I say that, I say that I don't want to make it sound like it's an easy process, because it's not easy to sell franchises. But I think that what people fail to understand is that it is a process. If you spend an adequate amount of money, you spend it in the right places, you're going to generate a predictable number of leads. If you handle those leads professionally, if you've got something good to sell, you provide them with a good message, you're going to get a predictable number of meetings. And if you have a well-structured franchise contract and you are able to deliver success to the franchisees that you have, you're going to be able to sell a predictable number of franchisees. The close rate in franchising is low. So it's, when I say that it's not difficult, it really is. It's a very specialized sale. The close rate in franchising historically has been about 2%. These days, post-pandemic, there have been a lot more people getting into franchising, and it's up to about 3.4%. But my point here is not that it's not difficult to sell, but that it's a predictable process, and that if you have a good offering, you have something that will work for the franchisee and provides a good return, if you follow that process, it should yield a predictable result, as long as you are doing the things right and making sure your franchisees are successful, and provide them with the right message and the right structure. You should be able to get a predictable result from your franchise marketing efforts.
Awesome. No, I think that's definitely a great myth to dispel, and definitely makes a lot of sense. So, well, now as we wrap up the episode, if people want to reach out to you, they want to be a customer, they want to be a client, they want to be an employee, they want to be an investor, they want to be your next best friend, any or all of the above, what's the best way to reach out to you, contact you, find out more?
The best way probably is to reach out to me at the company, just info@ifranchisegroup.com. I do a lot of traveling, so trying to reach out to me directly can be problematic. So info@ifranchisegroup.com is usually the best.
Awesome. Well, I definitely encourage people to reach out, make a new connection, support a great business. If nothing else, make a new best friend. So with that, thank you again for coming on the podcast. It's been fun. It's been a pleasure. Now, for all of you that listeners are out there, you can help us to share this expertise with even more startups and small businesses to help them along their journey to success. Just make sure to click share, subscribe, and leave us a review. And on that note, if along your journey you ever need help with patents, trademarks, or anything else with your startup or your small business, just go to strategymeeting.com, grab some time with us to chat, and we're always here to help. Thank you again, Mark, for coming on the podcast, and wish the next leg of your journey even better than the last.
Thanks very much, Devin. And by the way, if any of your listeners would like a free copy of my book on how to franchise your business, have them put that into email. And as a courtesy to your viewers, I'm happy to make sure that they get that.
Awesome. Well, I definitely appreciate the offer, and definitely encourage the listeners in the audience to take Mark up on a great offer and get a hold of his book. So, well, thank you again, Mark, and have a good rest of the week.